All right, this is Brian McKnight. I am doing a second installment for my little, I guess these things are called podcasts. I'm not very technically savvy.
That works.
Called The Professing Professor, a person who sometimes says things. I kind of needed a title. I'm not good at titles, as you can see. So I decided.
It's a very academic title. I like it.
and more often than not, it really does describe what we do sometimes. Sometimes say things.
Sometimes we say things.
Yeah, and sometimes they're of dubious quality. So.
Right. Sometimes they're helpful.
My guest today is, we have Hannah and Peter Ryan. Hannah and Peter are professors in the music department. I'm assuming you can tell who Hannah and Peter are. I don't think we need to do a full introduction, so we'll see. But they're professors in the music department, and interesting folks, active folks, talented folks. And I thought that the first thing I'd talk about today, or ask them to talk about, is the term or the phrase I use is like the graduate school question. You know, in graduate school, they ask me as a historian, what is history? And you start talking 2 hours later, you kind of, still talking about what is history. And I think they do the same thing to philosophers and stuff like that. But music, what is the magic of music? Why is it that music is absolutely universal among every different person and different culture? And there are thousands of different forms of it, but it's still magical. It still touches people.
Mm-hmm. I think what makes that kind of hard to answer is that it affects different people in different ways. So if you ask, 20 different people that same question, you might get 20 different answers as to why music is so important to them. So it does make it tricky. I mean, for instance, I'm a total classical geek. Instrumental classical, very specifically. I really like the stuff without words. And it's always been my approach to music to really focus in on what the instruments are doing, so the pitches and the rhythms. But most people, I think, take from music the lyric input too.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm a vocalist, so obviously the lyrics, they mean a lot to me. That's what I work with. But I think one of the reasons, and this is actually what I believe is so important about music, is that for every culture and throughout human history, music provides a way for humans to express emotions that they don't necessarily have ways to do in any other way, and in any other language, which is why every culture creates their own kind of music, and every generation creates their own kind of music, because they all need a new way to say something.
Well, let me throw something else out there then. You mentioned something I think is really interesting. We live in the 21st century. We have a billion different ways to express ourselves. Was music more important to the individual 300 or 400 years ago, where you don't necessarily have those abilities, than it is today? Or is music the ultimate timeless contribution?
Well, I always tell my choir students that what we do is so unique, especially today, because so much is electronic or recorded, but what we do in a rehearsal setting or in a performance setting, nothing will ever replicate that. That so much is digital today, and what we do is still analog. And so that allows us to communicate in an entirely different way.
And I would say even with the new digital methods, I mean, music, it really is timeless. It's just the way we consume it and the ways we disseminate it change, right? And the people who are allowed to participate, 400 years ago, it was much more difficult to be a professional musician without a lot of training. Nowadays, you can kind of hop in with an easy program like GarageBand or something and whip together something that sounds good without a whole ton of training. That's changed, right? But the humans haven't. We still love music. So how long have we been talking? 3 minutes? All right, it's time to bring up our son. So, our kid is 1 year old in a couple months, and he dances constantly. It doesn't matter what the source of music is. It can be some very weird piano music I'm listening to, or one of his toys playing the same stupid nursery rhyme song over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And his little hands that go in the air, he'll just start jamming out. He'll just stop in place and start dancing. And, it's not like we trained that into him. I don't think he's
No,
special.
neither
because
of
he's our
us are good
child.
enough dancers to make
That's for
that
sure.
like cool for him. So it's just something he started doing. Yeah, that's a really good point. It really is instinctual that it finds something in your brain and it lights it up in a way that nothing else does.
You could maybe even make a physics argument too, since music is just sort of organizing those sounds that,
Yeah.
when we sing, we're making like distinct pitches, but we're making pitches when we talk too, right? And so a lot of the music that we consume is really based in physics and how different sounds interact with each other to create consonances and dissonances.
I've always been impressed as a historian with how music speaks to contemporary events. You can take a look at the kind of music that grew out of historical moments. Very famously, the power of somebody like Wagner during the Germany in the 1930s, to embody what Germans or at least the Nazi movement considered themselves to be. But going back to Ellis, Disney has it figured out. Within a couple of years, you're going to know all kinds of new, great songs that also still will not make a heck of a lot of sense, but they are like magic. I don't know what it is, but they're kid magic. And boy, is that going to be a lot of fun. And I can imagine, I can imagine Hannah's going to be on stage somewhere and suddenly she's going to belt out some sort of a theme out of Toy Story or something. And not even realize she's doing it.
Yeah, Moana.
So I'm with you. I'm not a huge music guy, but I often catch myself changing tastes. You all are pretty dedicated to, or at least Peter said he was pretty dedicated to classical instrumental music. Do you catch yourself changing taste over time? And how far do you move away from what you've been trained in? Really, what I'm asking is, do you have like some sort of like a secret atonal fetish or something like that, where you have somebody?
No.
I mean, I teach that stuff. So
I teach it too, right?
What is it?
I
The
try to be
theremin?
as unbiased as possible.
Yeah.
I guess for me, what's really changed over the years is I still mostly all classical music, but there's a lot. That's hundreds of years worth of music stuffed into that category, right? And so what I used to enjoy in high school, I still kind of do, and that's like the big classics that everyone knows and loves. These like major symphonies that we've all heard, and I can name them now, and people wouldn't recognize the names, but they have heard them, right? Like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. We've all heard it, whether or not we know what I'm talking about. Right?
Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, your
right? We know so
cartoons,
much of
Saturday
it from
morning
cartoons.
cartoons always had classical music, and you've heard it all, like you say. You don't know where you heard it, or actually maybe you see like the Roadrunner going off a cliff or something. That's kind of how you
Right.
know it.
Yeah. But now I find myself pushing more and more to find underrepresented things, to find new paths and find like hidden gems.
Mm-hmm.
And I still like the classics and the popular things, the Chopins and the Bachs and the Beethovens, but like I really have a need now to go find more unique stuff to keep me satisfied.
Yeah, Peter alluded earlier to the accessibility of music, participating in it. For the past 400 years, you needed a certain music education, but it was also who it was accessible to, and generally the people participating in it, and the people whose music is represented today is pretty much the same, bunch of white guys over and over and over again. And so we both try to find underrepresented groups to perform who have fantastic music, but just hasn't been given the same kind of radio time that some of the other groups have. But also, I love the classical stuff, but honestly, in my free time, I listen to Taylor Swift, so and Disney. So.
And there you have it.
There you go.
And we're both raised on what was considered to be oldies in the 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
So like we're all about the Beatles and other contemporary bands.
Yeah.
I don't go on my way to listen to them. I do love their music.
Yeah. Well, I was in my garage earlier today, and I had I'm kind of telling you how first world I am. I had my television in my garage going, and the Queen movie was on. And,
yeah, it's a great
I
movie.
grew up a Queen fan, but I didn't think about it. It was just music, to me. But my goodness gracious, I mean, it's orchestral, really.
Yeah.
Huge influences. And I think I didn't watch the entire movie, but as I understand it, Freddie Mercury at some point did actually do some opera toward the end of his life. I don't know
He did.
how
Yeah,
much.
it was not very well received by critics, but yeah, he performed opera with, oh gosh, I forget the name of the opera star, but they did like an opera together.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like Billy Joel released like a classical piano album of his own classical compositions. I'd never listened to it. I just know it exists.
I love Peter's answers. He's like, no, I didn't do it, but I know it. I think he's done that twice so far. Well, I tell you what, I'm gonna go ahead and close this conversation, and we'll come back and we'll cover a couple more things. So, thank you all for talking with me this evening.